Okay, today we're looking at circumstantial tendencies. And I believe this was a name of a chapter of one of my books, a couple books ago, I think. But the idea, last week I talked about the concept of drawing to us certain kinds of experiences, and do we draw everything to us? And some people will say yes, that our consciousness is responsible for attracting people, places, and things, that show up in our life. And so I raised the question last week. We may choose to fly on an airline. Do we choose that obnoxious passenger that's seated next to us? And I have to think, no, we didn't make that choice. But the absolutist will say, yes, we did somehow draw that person to us. There's something we needed to learn from them, or something they needed to learn from us, or whatever. So, but there's no doubt that our life takes on the qualities of our consciousness. And I think instead of getting down and trying to micro-analyze just how much of that is true, if we take a broad view of it and just look at tendencies, what we want to do is, if we're having challenges in our life, if we're having repeated challenges in our life, the same thing coming up, as Freud said, with monotonous regularity, we will probably want to take a look at it and see how we can influence that particular thing that's unfolding, that continuously plagues us. So that's kind of the idea of circumstantial tendencies, and I want to talk about why this might happen and what we can do about it, why we might keep repeating the same types of things. I've done quite a bit of counseling in my 40-some years of ministry, and I will see people making the same mistakes over and over, and I guess I would include myself there too. I have gotten in ruts in my life where will manifest the same kinds of situations, and you've got to break the pattern somehow. Sometimes it's in choosing mates. You may have a real talent for choosing an abusive mate, and you may get rid of that one and pick up another one and do that 3 or 4 times. I've seen people do that a number of times. It's not a judgment call. It's simply, if that's happening, what can we do about it? We don't want to dwell on the problem. We want to look for a solution. Is there a spiritual remedy to that? And there is. But it takes some, like any good remedy, it takes some understanding, it takes some practice, it takes some dying to the old self, to the old ways, the old perceptions. It takes some acknowledgement of what those may be and what things might be interfering, so we can change the tendencies of the way our life unfolds. So I write, every new enterprise, every decision you make to pursue your passion is going to evoke some level of confrontation between the stronger and the weaker elements of your self-image. Have you ever had a brilliant idea that you got all excited about? You start out doing it, and then not too far down the road you start hitting scraping bottom. You start wondering if this was the right thing. I've shared with you many times that I've written 8 books, and every single one of them, I always started with this idea, and it was the idea that was going to change the world. But then you have to write that out, and you have to put it into sentences, paragraphs, sections, chapters, and put it all in order, and that's quite a process. It's a lot of work, and you do have a lot of actually writing, I have concluded, it's just a process of problem solving, because that's all you're doing all the time. You've got an idea you want to put on paper and convey to other people, so you want to do that in an intelligent way, hopefully. So you're always having to solve some problem. Maybe it's a grammatical thing, maybe it's maybe you just don't have a good understanding of the idea you're trying to convey. And if you don't, you find out very quickly because you drag down. But you start out with a lot of inspiration, a lot of enthusiasm. I've got this brilliant idea. I'm going to write a book. And then you get into the weeds of it, and it's quite a different thing. And so you have to, what you do is you start confronting all your self-doubt, all of the negative side. You know, it starts out positive, and then up comes the negative because you're actually putting it into practice and finding that it's not all a bed of roses. So you set your goals based on your strengths or your talents, your interests and your dreams. In the process of manifesting them, you encounter challenges that summon all your weaknesses as well. And I think it's important to know this, because if you are, maybe you are an idea person, but you don't carry through with the ideas, that's probably why you don't. Because you're confronted with all of your weaknesses anytime you set out in a particular direction. You know, it's the Bible tells this story over and over, especially like when Israel left Egypt. They were all excited, you know, they're all, finally, the day of freedom has shown up. So they are confronted with their worst nightmares right off the bat. And that never stops. You know, all through their trek through the wilderness, they're confronted with major issues that would cause them to go back. You know, they would start accusing Moses. Like, why did you have this idea? You know, we were a lot happier in Egypt. And Moses, you know, he's going, well, it wasn't my idea. You know, I just following what you guys wanted. But they hit the edge of what they thought was their strongest points, and they began to complain. And that's our story. That tells our story, our creative story. You know, if you want to move to any promised land, you think you're just going to have the idea and jump over there one day. You won't. You're going to have to confront every fear that you have, every weakness, every self-doubt. You don't have to. You can try to work around those things. But it's very helpful to know that's going to happen. It's not negative. It is going to happen. You are going to have to confront the things that stand between you and where you want to be. And that's part of your self-image. It's the weaker part of your self-image, of our self-image. The strength that we have is drawn from this now moment. Weakness dominates when we use the past or future as our basis of thinking. And I kind of jumped into a whole new idea here, but this is the secret to understanding how to keep moving forward. When I'm writing, for example, and I run into a problem, what I often find the best way to handle it is let it go, lay it down, let go of it. Not try to work on it so hard. I mean, if you work and work and work, I've worked 3 days on a paragraph and ended up throwing it away. Maybe that's just my bad writesmanship or whatever you call it. What do you call it? Anyway, it's my problem, obviously. But you know, you can let something go and then pretty soon it just flashes how to do it. Very clear. When you're struggling really hard, what you're doing is you're trying to employ your weaknesses. You're trying to protect your weaknesses. You're trying to figure out how to keep those intact. And you're trying to use those to perpetuate them. This is not conscious. We're not doing this consciously. We think that the weaknesses that we carry are part of what we are, part of our real self. So your strength is drawn from this now moment. What this means is you let go of the problem that you have, that you're dealing with, and you open yourself to the inspiration of this now moment that is available here in this now moment. Now, what we mean by this, there's only one place you can be in time. Anybody know where that is? It's now. We can conceive of a future, we can conceive of a past, but can you actually inhabit those places? We think we can. That's what worry is. Worry is the belief that you can handle something that's unfolding in the future. What I've said often is we only worry about the things we can do nothing about. So what we do when we worry, we're pulling ourselves out of this now moment, and we're weakening ourselves by doing that. And so the beginning of handling a problem from a spiritual point of view is to let go of what you're working on and call your attention back, bring your attention back to this now moment. This only place you can be. The illustration I like to give is just stand any place and say, this is here, this is where I am, this is now. And you look at another place off, that's there. Can you ever inhabit there? Can you ever go there? Because when you walk a couple of steps to there, where are you? You're still here. You can't get out of here. You can never be there. And the most stressful aspects of our life are there. They're thinking about there, something that's happening there that's going to be here one day but is not yet. There was a Mark Twain that said, I've had a lot of tragedy in my life, but only about 10% of it manifested, or something like that. Just worrying. And that is so true. And you can think of something that's happened in the past and you can get all worked up about it, get upset about it. And it destroys your now moment, destroys the quality of your now moment. So we draw our strength from this now moment. That is, we let go of the things that are going through our minds that we're not resolving, and we probably never will. The things we're dragging along behind. So weakness dominates when we use the past or future as our basis of thinking. Now think about that. That's when you're at your weakest, when you are worried about something you can do nothing about. And that's when you're using your past or your future as your basis of thinking. It's a pretty powerful idea when you think about it. The real problem that we all have is not in the actual thing, it's in the perception. And that is not always easy to sort out, to deal with, because it sure looks like people, places, and things can be the source of our problems. But I pointed out many times that person that's giving you a hard time could be 100 miles away, and you could be having a negative experience thinking about them. Here. They're not even here and you're having a bad experience with them. Where's that taking place? It takes place in a domain we have something to say about. The area of our thought and our feeling. Self-doubt, fear of failure, feelings of lack, impatience, anger, lethargy, and indifference creep in as we mull over future possibilities or mull over issues of the past. That is, future negative possibilities. Like Job, you find yourself saying, the thing I feared most is upon me, and the thing I dreaded is now before me. And I always say that has to happen. When you start out on some enterprise, all this negativity is going to come up, and it has to come up. Otherwise, you won't know it's there. You won't know what it is. You won't analyze it to the point of overcoming it. You'll just assume it's part of you, and you'll say, well, I can't write a book. I can't do this, or I can't do that. That's just me. I can't do that. But you can. You can do it. Not the you that you've identified yourself as, but the you that you truly are. And that's where the whole spiritual thing comes into play. What are you? What am I? Am I this thing that I have defined, that I have let my body define, that was born back in the 50s and is here now, and certain gender, certain all the things that surround me, the bodily. Is that who I am? Or am I something more than that? I ran across this fellow this week, and I guess he's been around a while. Dr. Edward Kelly. And I'm not going to recommend either one of these books, because I haven't read them yet. But if I was going to recommend either one of them, The Irreducible Mind is about $55 or something. It's a very expensive book, 800 and some pages. Beyond Physicalism is one that sounds the most interesting to me, but what I would recommend is that you Google him and look for interviews on YouTube. He's a remarkable individual. He works at the University of Virginia, where they have, I think, the cutting edge of science going on that is looking at the nature of the human being from a spiritual level. There's 3 departments there. One is Dr. Bruce Greyson. He is one of the leading experts on the near-death research. You've got Dr. Jim Tucker. He is heading up a department that interviews children who have had memories of past lives. And his work is to confirm the facts that the kids share. And I've actually been in touch with him about a case that I had a number of years ago, a little boy, 3 or 4-year-old boy that claimed he was his grandfather, and led the parents to the graveside and did all kinds of things that just totally freaked them out. And they were of a traditional faith, so they had no belief in reincarnation at all. And so they were looking for help. And the story was pretty remarkable, so I reported it to Jim Tucker. But and the third area is Dr. Edward Kelly, all of University of Virginia. But his main thing is modern science says that we are a function, our consciousness is a function of the brain only. And that when we die, that's it. We're gone. There's nothing left. And his research is to debunk that idea. And when I say mainstream science, I'm talking 90% of our scientists out there are proclaiming consciousness is the result of neurological processes, the brain. And that's all we are. The people that are dealing from this perspective are saying that there is consciousness beneath that which we see, that the reality is unseen, but it is real. And all things are made out of this. And of course, when you get into religion, you call that God. They're reluctant to do that because they're working in the scientific community. They're reluctant to call our soul the soul. They'd prefer to call it use some other terms to describe what we are as spiritual beings. But this whole idea of near-death research tying into this is that you have a person on an operating table that dies, and they rise above their body and they look down and they see and describe things that are going on, and there's no question that what they're saying is legitimate. So the material scientists, or they call them now physicalism, not materialism, but physicalism is the newest term, I guess. They're saying that is not possible, and when somebody reports that, they always give some other explanation as to how that could happen. Consciousness cannot possibly be separated from the brain. But another group of scientists are studying psychedelics. And they've come up with a very interesting thing, and I'm not promoting psychedelics, don't get me wrong. I'm just heard something very interesting about that. In the study of psychedelics, they wire people up and they try to figure out what the psychedelic does to their brain. What part of the brain does it stimulate? And to their total shock, they discovered that psychedelics do not stimulate any part of the brain. They actually shut it down. They shut the brain down so the person then has a mystical experience. So the implication is, or the suggestion is, that the brain actually hinders our ability to have a spiritual awakening. That when certain things are shut down, and that's basically what the process of meditation does, it shuts down, I don't know about part of the brain, but that's what we advocate, is still the mind. So that's a very interesting thing. And you know, a lot of Native American people use different psychedelics in their religious ceremonies, and this is probably why, because it puts the brain aside so they can have a direct experience. And I think they're finding out more about this all the time. It's under controlled conditions. You know, it's a pretty fascinating study. Back in the 60s, there were no scientists around when the people were taking psychedelics, so there wasn't a lot of information that came out of it legitimately. But they're doing it now, and it's very fascinating. But the point here is the brain the source of consciousness, or is it a transmitter? Is it like the television set that's picking up all the channels, you know, that are floating through the air? It's not the source. It's a transmitter. And this group of scientists are saying the brain is a transmitter. It's not the originator of consciousness. And the mystic has always said that. You get back into the mystical traditions, and beyond physicalism, the subtitle is Toward Reconciliation of Science and Spirituality. Not science and religion, science and spirituality. And that is going back into the ancient, even Eastern, some of the Eastern religions they're saying are pretty much in line with what they're discovering. Very interesting stuff. So I recommend just Google him or go on YouTube and type in his name, and you'll get a whole bunch of interviews that are very much worth listening to. Dr. Bruce Greyson, another one, look him up. Jim Tucker, look him up. They're all there. I mean, YouTube is a wonderful resource for this kind of thing. You know, it's just a wonderful place where you can hear some of the most brilliant people on the planet. I really use it all the time. So don't be surprised when this side of your, I'm saying all this for a reason. I'm laying this out for a reason. Don't be surprised when this side of your consciousness arises. It's neither comfortable nor convenient, but the arousal of these stifling elements is both inevitable and necessary. This is what Jesus was talking about to Nicodemus when he said, you must be born again. You're born of the flesh or you're born of the spirit. That's what we're talking about. Or do you see the brain as the source of your being, born of the flesh? Or do you see the brain as a transmitter? You are born of spirit. And he says, to understand the kingdom of God, you have to be born anew. You have to be born of the Spirit. That means you have to stop thinking of yourself as originating here in this package that we call a human body. And when we stop doing that, because that is the source of our problems, when we rise above that, this is what prayer and meditation is all about. It's getting out of yourself, this self that you've defined as the real me. It's not the real you. That part of you that's having the problems, the thing you fear most, that's where it comes from. Because you are seeing yourself as something less than you are in truth, which is why you're fearing. Doesn't the Bible tell us that we were not given a spirit of fear? So where does that come from? It's our own invention and the invention of our culture. It's all part of it. Again, if 90% of our scientists believe that we're all products of our brain, that's a very strong influence, a very strong part of our culture to deal with. That's what's in our educational system. That's what we're being taught. And science is a wonderful thing. It's produced many wonderful inventions, and we don't want to minimize that, but their view of the human being is demeaning, absolutely demeaning. Because they say your consciousness is an accident. It just happens to happen. That's demeaning, in my opinion. I'm not going to go so far as to say it's racist. I'm so sick of hearing that word. It's demeaning. I am a spiritual being, an expression of whatever it is underlies this thing we call life. I'm part of that. I'm an expression of that, but I forget that, and I experience things like fear. Fear doesn't come from me. It comes from a perception of me. It comes from a false perception of me. So when we have a fear, we say, okay, this is not me, what is it? These things call our attention to the areas that need our attention. Our mind is wandering into the past or future. It's time to reel it in to the now. So that's the point of this, is if you're doing something and you're being blocked by fear, you can say, well, that's just me. I'm not made to do this. It's not God's will, or whatever you want to say about it. Or you can say, well, what is this? The thing I fear most, here it is. Do I run from it? Or do I face it? Do I say, why would me, a spiritual being who is created fearlessly, without fear, why would I be afraid? So it's on the table, the fear's on the table, and I'm saying, it's here, I don't deny that. But what's its source? And why am I cowering? That's what Israel did. First thing out of the chute, they go to the edge of the Red Sea, and here come the Egyptians. What's their reaction? Same as most of us. Who wouldn't freak out? But Moses said to fear not. He's getting them back to their spiritual roots. Lift up your eyes. Take your eyes off the problem. See the salvation that the Lord will work for you today. Use your mind in a different way. Stop looking at the Egyptians. That's what it's saying. Change your mind. Bring yourself into the now where your power is. But don't be afraid to look at the problems. Just be sure you identify them correctly. They are a product of your self-image, not of you as a spiritual being. And as such, you can do something about it. If you are just a product of the brain, there's nothing you can do. You're just the product of your upbringing, of genetics, of whatever, all the outside influences. Not much you can do about that. You just are what you are. So why are we into this spiritual stuff if it doesn't give us a practical way out of our problems? So we take our problems, the thing that we fear most that's come upon us, and we look at it. The temptation is to suppress these unwanted elements, but unless the things you fear most come upon you, unless they're brought into the full light of your awareness, you'll never be able to trace them back to their sources and permanently release the negative influence they have on your circumstantial tendencies. And you see, that's why our life tends to manifest in certain patterns, because we never get in touch with the thing we fear most. We try to protect it. And I've asked the question, are we advancing a strength, or are we protecting a weakness in our reactions to life? I've always thought that was a good question. I ask myself that, when I'm angry at somebody. Why am I angry? Am I advancing a strength, or am I protecting a weakness? Why do I fear something? Is fear a positive thing that strengthens my soul? How could it be if I was not born with it? It's just a good question. Am I advancing a strength, or am I protecting a weakness? So we kind of approach this in this way. Whatever you're dealing with, if you've got something going on right now, in particular, it's a good time to begin. To understand that fear rises from the mind wandering into places it is powerless to resolve. I've talked about the bear, two different kinds of bears, the one that's under your bed at night, as a kid, and the one that the actual bear. Fear of one is totally different than fear of the other. One's justified, the real bear, but it's the bear under the bed that causes all the problems, that keeps us awake at night. So you understand that fear rises from the mind wandering into places it's powerless to resolve. You're laying in bed at night, you imagine there's a bear under your bed. Can you resolve that? As long as you're laying in bed. You can get up, but who's going to risk their life doing that if you think there's a bear under your bed? Better to just lay there and be afraid all night long until you fall asleep. See, that's what I'm saying. But if it's a real bear, you take precautions. But that bear under the bed, that's the worst one. That'll get you. Observe the source of your discomfort. Observe that the source of your discomfort is your future projections and past regrets. If you totally bring your awareness into this now moment, you will lose your fear. And you can practice this in very simple ways. When you find your mind is just churning off in some direction, you can even focus on just something as simple as your breathing. I think they're calling it mindful. Kelly, what's that thing, mindfulness? It's a practice they've introduced into schools and so forth that help people bring their awareness into the now moment. And look that up also. There's some really good things on YouTube, mindfulness. And there's a guy that I was listening to last night, as a matter of fact. But don't worry about that. Just look it up and you'll find something about it. Very simple. To bring your scattered thought into this now moment using the simplest techniques. And you find that your whole body begins to relax. That stress that's built up in your stomach or wherever it is, you begin to let it go. You say, well, I'm not solving the problem by listening to my breathing. Yes, you are. Because the problem is you. The problem is the experience you're having. And you want to change that. You want to improve the quality of your life right now. So bring your full attention into the now moment and refuse to become entangled in phantoms from the past or future. I would usually say it's easier said than done, but it's actually easier to do it than not do it, because it will alleviate your struggle. And it'll do it fairly quickly. You don't have to be a yogi to do this, but it's the beginnings of the process of meditation, is bringing your awareness into the now moment. That's the key, because that's where you actually live. That's where I live, in this now moment. But where does our mind live? Rarely in this now moment. Right? Okay? So you can do this, can't you? I can do it. If I can do it, you can do it. All right. Thanks for coming out. See you next week.
You've been watching a talk presented by Reverend Doug Bottorff at Independent Unity here in beautiful Grand Junction, Colorado. We would like to thank everyone who joined us here today, as well as those of you who joined us online. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please like and subscribe to our channel. And be sure to share it with those you think who might benefit from this message. If this brought value to your life, please consider donating to us on PayPal. Thanks again for watching.